is called Nail Stew, and it is a folk tale from Sweden. Smiled at her and said, I'd be happy to make enough for both of us if only I could use your stove and cooking pot. The woman looked confused. He pulled a nail from his pocket and said, For nail stew. I have never heard of nail stew, said the woman. It is very good, said the man. The woman set a pot of water on the stove, and the man dropped the nail into the water. Better with salt, thought the man aloud. A dash or two for the stew. I have plenty of salt, thought the woman. She gave the man salt, and he added it to the pot. Then the man said, Better with flour, a dash or two for the stew. I have plenty of flour, thought the woman. She gave the man some flour, and he stirred it into the stew. The man stopped to suggest other ingredients to the woman, always adding, a dash or two for the stew. Curious to taste the stew, the woman gave the man each ingredient. He stirred each one into the stew. It smelled delicious. Now it is ready. The woman tasted the stew and thought, It's hard to believe this hearty meal started with just a nail. Then she asked the man for his recipe, not realizing she had added all the ingredients. And this is our page that has the key question along with some other things. The key question says, why do different cultures tell similar stories? So let's think about that for a second. Why do different cultures tell similar stories? So we're going to go back and look at our story for a second and think and talk about the key question. So the title is Nail Stew, and it tells you it's a folk tale from Sweden. If you take a look at the picture on the front, you see the woman that they described, and there's the man, and she thought he was a beggar, someone who might not have a lot of money, and that he might be asking her for things. And there they are. There's the berry bush. When we go on to the next page, it talks about that she was grumpy and she was getting ready to make dinner, and that because his clothes were worn, she thought that he was a beggar, and she didn't really want to share anything with him. And she asked him what he wanted, and he said he was only picking berries for dessert. And she was confused because she was wondering, why would he be having dessert if he didn't have dinner yet? She assumed that he hadn't had dinner because he looked like he didn't have very much money. And he told her, I have everything I need in my pocket. And he smiled at her and said he'd be happy to make enough for both. And so then he said that he could use her stove to do it. And she looked a little confused. He took a nail out and he showed it to her, and he called it nail stew. And he proceeded to convince the woman to give him all these different ingredients to make the stew. What she didn't realize is that what he was doing was he started with the nails, but he was able to convince her to add all the other ingredients. So although he was stirring the pot and putting the things in, it was actually the woman who made all the ingredients, gave all the ingredients for the stew. And so at the end of the story, they talked a little bit more, and each time that he added an ingredient that she gave him to add, he would say a dash or two for the stew. So the woman tasted the stew, and she thought, it's hard to believe this hearty meal started with just a nail. Then she asked the man for his recipe, but she wasn't thinking that she was the one who added all the ingredients. Every time he said it would taste better with something, she was willing to give him the ingredients. And you can tell in the picture that she seems to think that the stew tastes really good. So Again, our key question is, why do different cultures tell similar stories? So if you think for a minute, does this story sound like a story that you might have heard before? Perhaps stone soup? These are our key questions. Actually, our key question is, why do different cultures tell similar stories? But here are some of our other questions that we need to think about. So we're going to read the key question, which we already did. Then we're going to read the story, which we did. And we went back in the story and we looked for details to help us answer the key question. So in our retell chart, they want us to name the characters. And there was the grumpy woman and the man that looked like a beggar. What is the theme of our story? What happened in the story? How did it end? Think about the key question, which is, why do different cultures tell similar stories? And then